topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks, everybody, for joining again today. I am Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com. In addition, we're on Facebook, and that's live on Facebook at Winning Business Radio. And after the live show, you're going to see us on all those platforms where you get your favorite podcasts: YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, et cetera, et cetera. The mission of Winning Business Radio and TV, as regular viewers and listeners know, is to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, to learn best practices, the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, and to be challenged, and I believe, hopefully, to be inspired by the successes of others. Those are consultants, coaches, advisors, authors, founders and owners and entrepreneurs, people with expertise. But interestingly, virtually every successful person I've ever talked to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So while we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, I say it every week, I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. I've spent the better part of my career equipping businesses to grow, from solopreneurs to small and medium-sized companies all the way up to the Fortune 50. I've seen some of those companies win, and to varying degrees, I've seen some fail. I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the highest performing people around and with some who probably should have found other professions. In my own businesses, I've had lots of success, but some failures too. And I like to think I've learned a lot from those experiences. So yeah, you'll hear from me, my opinions and insights. But more importantly, you're going to hear from experts, coaches, advisors, et cetera. And today is no exception. Timothy Swords, executive coach, certified mindfulness teacher, and principal of Mindful Leadership Executive Coaching. Here's his bio. Timothy recently transitioned his consultant practice to a new mindfulness meditation practice. As of 2024, Timothy is an executive coach and certified mindfulness teacher. As principal of Mindful Leadership Executive Coaching, he utilizes his decades of experience as a financial services executive, CFO, and management consultant with rigorous mindfulness training, including more than 2,000 hours of meditation practice and study under world-renowned teachers, including Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, Joe Kabat-Zinn, and Trudy Goodman. The end result is a bespoke, values-driven approach that enables executives, business owners, and senior leaders to cultivate a self-awareness, emotional resilience, and authenticity to lead with clarity and purpose. Working in person and virtually, Timothy has worked with clients in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as with executives in Boston, Chicago, Houston, New York, and Phoenix. Drawing on his experience as a senior executive with Fidelity Investments, PwC, and MUFG Union Bank, and consultants to clients including Merck, Lam Research, and Cisco, he combines traditional corporate executive coaching methodologies with scientifically proven mindfulness practices. This highly effective approach helps clients navigate the complexities of leadership with greater clarity, confidence, and purpose. Beyond teaching mindfulness meditations and techniques, Timothy touts the science behind mindfulness practice in helping practitioners make lasting change, both behaviorally and in the psychology of one's brain. That science is backed up, and we'll hear about it, by researchers at Harvard Medical School, Mass General Hospital, and numerous other institutions. Timothy holds a BS in accounting from Boston College, a Harvard MBA, and a graduate certificate in executive coaching from William James University. Timothy, welcome to Winning Business Radio.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I appreciate it. I know that you're busy, and appreciate you taking some time out. So a little bit of background. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island, about 45-minute train ride from Manhattan.
Okay. And What was it like to grow up there? Was it rural? Was it city? Was it suburb?
I'm definitely a suburban boy.
Yeah.
It was definitely suburbia. It was fantastic growing up there. It's about a 15-minute drive from the Atlantic Ocean. So I
Nice.
grew up swimming and surfing, which is kind of where my little logo is derived
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
You can't stop the waves, but it can be a joy to surf them. If you know how to surf the emotions of your own mind, that's very helpful. We'll get into that in a little bit. Now, growing up there was great. It was a very well-resourced public school system I went to. So, I ran track. I played soccer. I played the French horn. You got all the uniforms.
Nice. I played trumpet and I played 1 year of football, but I played the trumpet since I was second grade, I think.
Nice.
I still play. All right. From there, though, you made your way to Boston to attend Boston College. What was behind that decision?
Well, I had wanted to study accounting, study business. I had studied a little bit of it before going there, and I was the first one, at least on my father's side of the family, which is the side of the family I knew the best. No one had been in business for generations. They were ministers and missionaries and
No kidding.
teachers and so forth. And when I started studying accounting, it was like this window into the business world. And I had started working when I was 12 to start saving money for college. And
wow.
So I started running my own little business as a kid. But
what was the business?
Well, I had a paper route. I worked at a beach club doing things like that. But I also wanted a liberal arts education. So that's how I got to Boston College.
And the timing's probably doesn't worry as much, but when did you get your MBA and why did you decide to go do that? MBA.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I graduated BC. I went into a national CPA firm. I was auditing banks mostly. And it just wasn't, that interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of going back to school for psychology, actually. And some friends of mine heard about this. And they said, well, while you're applying to graduate school, maybe you could do our accounting and bookkeeping and so forth. And I was like, I have like a degree from Boston College in accounting. I don't know about bookkeeping, but I talked to some of their mentors, their CPA, and another guy who was the president of a pretty well-established consulting firm. Like, oh, you could really learn something. This business is doing well. So I went to work for this little startup that was making transparent rainbows. That was their biggest problem. And one thing led to the next. We grew really fast. We became an Inc. fastest growing 500 company. And I kind of grew into being the COO and CFO in my 20s. And we got to a certain point of growing this business. We had no idea what we were doing organizationally. Product wise, we were great. Sales, we were great. And so we hired a consultant, and this guy helped us make so much change in a few months that I was really inspired by that. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I went to business school.
I had a little similar experience in that I'd seen consultants at work, and I'm thinking, well, these guys get paid pretty well. I know they work hard. They're really smart, but they're well respected. And very early on, I thought, I didn't think it would ever happen, but I thought, geez, I'd like to do that. And it, eventually did, but I get you. I get you totally. All right. From the MBA experience, I always like to ask, and I'll ask this a few times, what was your most important lesson learned from your MBA education?
Well, it was an interesting education. So I've been in this tiny little business, and suddenly I was with, really like very high performers who had been in investment banking, which honestly, I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah. That's when you invest in a bank, right?
Right, exactly. And so, that was a bit of a humbling experience, being with top performers, a lot from Ivy League, which wasn't really my background, And so it was a great learning about like how big corporations work, honestly, because Harvard Business School is a big class. There's 810 students in a class. So it's just being there is like being a large corporation.
With a lot of other high performers, as you said. All right, so just a little bit of a walk through your career, just because I've got a couple questions. PwC, large consultancy.
Yeah.
You sold and led delivery of organizational development. It says, talk a bit about what you took away from that experience. Again, PwC is like one of the, arguably top three. Call it what you want in consultancy, but really smart people, good performers. What would you say about that experience?
Yeah, so I did a number of things there. I started in the strategic planning group, and then got into business process reengineering. So, helping companies become more efficient. And then, of course, you need to, as part of implementing those things, you need to be able to understand organizational design and development and so forth. I actually learned how to write there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was like we actually hired a woman, Barbara Minto. I still remember. She was the first female professional employee at McKinsey.
Wow.
And she actually developed their writing and how to present, how to write for presentations. And it was a great learning, actually. And because what we would do as strategy consultants in particular, we'd go out for like 3 months and just do all this research. We would have so much data. And then we would have to distill it down for a presentation for the executives of the client. And so, honestly, at first, I didn't even know where to start. And
I can imagine.
She taught this method of like, what are your top 7 messages, right? And then I kind of learned to like trust my gut, like just write out like what you thought the executives needed to hear in 7 bullets. And it actually cut through so much of like going through all the materials and thinking, where do we start? And blah, blah, blah. It's like, just start at the simplest high level, because you can always fill in the details, right? And we had tons of details. We had tons of data, tons of anecdotes, tons of charts. So it really helped me sort of trust my gut about, I know what the story is. I've been immersed in this data for 3 months. I don't need to try to share it all at once. There's a logical sequence. And it was a great way to work with a team too, because, we'd all have somewhat different perspectives. And so we could get in a room and sort of debate what that storyline was. And then once that was agreed upon, then we could kind of delegate, okay, you do, the first part of the deck, you do the middle, you do the end.
Were those presentations led by an executive, or were they led by the team?
So in the consulting world, it's kind of an interesting arrangement. It's a fairly it's mostly a meritocracy. So that pretty much while you're putting these materials together, any voice, no matter what level, is welcome to be heard. But then when you go to the client, typically the senior partner leads off with some kind of intro, and then who's ever running the project, they lead the presentation. Usually that's how it goes, because the data. The partner knows the highlights, right?
Let's see. Do you want to touch on CSC Index or Palladium? I do want to get to Fidelity, but do you want to touch on either of those, maybe some key lessons?
Yes, sure. So when I was it was actually the Cooper side of PwC prior to the merger. I had started in strategy, as I said, Kevin, and then, the Japanese were kind of kicking our butts with total quality and actually coming out with high quality products at a lower cost. And so a lot of the work switched to helping organizations catch up, if you will, and really be able to satisfy their customers better, but at a lower cost. So Cooper's had really been leading the way in that area in their manufacturing practice. So these guys had gone to Japan and seeing what they were doing at Toyota and Honda and so forth. And I worked with them on some strategy projects that then became implementation projects at big companies like AT&T and so on. And then I actually led an effort to translate those learnings to white collar environments. So I did some of the first business reengineering projects for the mutual fund industry, actually the back offices of Putnam Mutual Funds, Fidelity Investments, an ad agency. That was really fascinating in Detroit. one of their clients was Chevrolet, which they'd had before General Motors existed. So there's like 100-year customer retention story. But they also had smaller clients, and they didn't quite understand why the approach with Chevy wasn't working, with other clients. And so, I had a blast, like applying those kind of principles to these white collar, more service oriented environments. And they did things like literally like knock down walls, so people could all work together and things like that. It's very fun.
Smart.
So doing that work, I got recruited to CSE Index because they were really the pioneer in business process reengineering. And Michael Hammer, worked with them. He wrote the original articles in the Harvard Business Review and for MIT's Review and so forth. New York Times, I landed New York Times as a client for them.
Very cool.
Client and for the New York office. And then I got recruited to, it was then called, it was part of, before it was acquired by Palladium, it was the Balanced Scorecard Collaborative was one of their names that they ran under. And these were the guys who really had invented the balanced scorecard concept. So Kaplan from the Harvard Business School and Norton, who was really kind of a groundbreaker and originally like one of the first IT strategy guys. And they had come up with this concept because on that kind of re-engineer, when re-engineering was the rage, people were gathering all this operational data. They kind of didn't know what to do with all of it. And so Kaplan and Norton put together this concept, which on the faces it's fairly simple, which is if you want to get great financial results, you need to satisfy your customers. If you want to satisfy your customers, you need processes that work really well. If you want processes that work really well, you need the people with the right skills with access to the right information.
Yeah.
Well, that concept, if you then say, okay, what are the goals for those 4 areas? And then how are we going to measure success? Turn out to be hugely powerful for successful strategy execution. So for example, one of their early clients was Mobil Oil. And they helped Mobil Oil swing from a negative cash flow of $500 million to a positive cash flow of $500 million in 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. Now they had a new strategy and so forth, but this is what drove the implementation of it. So I learned those principles with Kaplan and Norton and applied them in other industries.
All right, we're going to take our first break right here. We'll be back, everybody, with Timothy Swords in about 1 minute.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We are back with Timothy Swords. And I'm going to ask you, so while you're doing this, while you're working in the corporate world, were you starting to identify some of the areas that need the work that you're doing now? I mean, did you see any of that at that time?
What do you mean by
mindfulness, executive development, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, of course. I had we hadn't really talked about this, but I taught myself how to meditate from a book when I was 15 years old.
I was going to ask that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because despite being smart, or maybe somewhat because I was too cocky, I had done okay in school without studying that hard, but that didn't really work in math class. And I was a very avid reader, so I had somehow tripped across this thing called meditation that you could do to calm your mind and feel less anxious. And so I started practicing that literally in math class, like breathing. I literally breathed my way through 10th grade math class.
Wow.
And I also did other things. I went for extra help, studied at night, things like that. But it was super helpful. And then later in early college, I started doing transcendental meditation every day, twice a day for 20 minutes, and was really amazed at like the states of mind you could.
And you were in Boston. You weren't even in San Francisco at the time.
Yeah, well, in New York, where I grew up.
That was a little humor there.
Yeah. No, it's really true. And so I can talk more about that if you want, or we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll add that in just a few minutes.
Great. So, but yeah, what happened was after I was spent 6 years at Fidelity Investments leading business transformation projects, was head of strategy for their brokerage division, which is all their retail distribution plus back office platforms for retail brokers like that are at banks and so forth. Then I went out on my own, and I was doing consulting, mostly focused on strategy execution, as I was talking about a little bit earlier. But I was working really like shoulder to shoulder with the leadership teams, showing them how to create strategy, figure out strategy, show them how to execute. So they really owned it. I wasn't going off and doing research for months and coming back with a study that might have.
I noticed you started that in 03-ish.
Yeah.
And Union Bank comes after that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, so while I was working with these leaders, they then started to ask me to coach them. And I kind of sort of knew what that was, but not really. So that's when I went to school at night for 2 years at a graduate school of psychology, William James University.
Yeah.
It was then called the Massachusetts Professional School of Psychology. But
I'm familiar with it, actually. Yeah.
All right.
I'm familiar with it, actually.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. So mostly they graduated PhDs and PsyDs, but they had started this executive coaching program. So really grounded in, a pretty rigorous approach, using a lot of 360 assessments and other kinds of assessments to have real data on people's behavior and how they're being perceived versus how they're perceiving themselves. So yeah, I certainly started to see that in the people I was working with.
When and why, not when was, all right. So talk about your consulting practice, and then I'm going to ask you when and why you started to transition to a mindfulness practice. Talk about the work that you did at T-Swords.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I was doing a lot of strategy execution work, and the clients range from like little tiny nonprofits you never heard of to literally like the global 50, Merck Pharmaceuticals, Lam Research, which makes the equipment, make chips like Intel, right, would be there. NVIDIA would be there.
So these would be executives, senior leaders, maybe up and coming leaders and managers?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So when I was doing the strategy execution work, that was with the leadership team, either a company or a division. And I was certified as a coach by then. So I was also doing coaching. And so I did that, kind of having my feet in both the consulting and the coaching camps, if you will. And then about 15 years ago, people started to ask me to teach mindfulness classes in corporate settings. Like they heard I was doing this thing and they were curious about it. And it was becoming more in the press. There was
I mean, when you first, at least my experience, when you first hear it, seems kind of out there. But then when you start to understand it, that's why I want to have you on. When people start to understand it, it really is so beneficial.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to jump to the present for a second. So there was an article recently in the Harvard Business Review, just like the bastion of capitalist media, right? On the title was something like, self-awareness is more important to a CEO's success in running his company or her company than an MBA. And this was a research-based article. So and why is that true? So self-awareness is like the foundation of emotional intelligence, right? And mindfulness is all about awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of how you're impacting others, right? So, so I've been practicing mindfulness a long time. It was more in the press. People were curious about it. Didn't sound as crazy as when I first started. Like, went off and did a 10-day silent retreat. Like, that sounds like you're out of your mind, right?
Yeah, in a yurt in Mexico or something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I started teaching in very corporate environments, like for the Young Presidents Organization, or the National Association of Corporate Directors, for the Private Directors Association, and then for nonprofits, for asset management firms. And then when I was recruited to Union Bank after I moved to San Francisco, the head of HR and I had met, and she had some background in mindfulness, and she asked me to help her roll it out across the bank. So we created a national program for the bank.
All right, pause right there, and let me ask, what did she identify? She did. You've probably validated it, but what did she identify as the needs that mindfulness would be the solution for?
Right. Got it. So, I mean, her personal experience, which she shared, I'm not telling any stories, was that she had breast cancer.
Wow.
And she went to the Mayo Clinic, and part of her treatment was a mindfulness-based stress reduction program that was developed by this guy, John Kabat-Zinn, who I actually know very well. He used to live down the street from me in Lexington, Massachusetts. And he created this program after getting his PhD in microbiology at MIT, right? So he's, not a woo-woo kind of guy.
Yeah.
And now that program is rolled out probably hospitals all over the world. But so she understood that how much mindfulness can help your emotional health, and how your emotional health helps everything else, right? And so if you're an executive, there's many things you can react to in a day, right? There's a lot of stresses thrown at you.
Internal and external, right?
That's right. That's right. And most of the external ones you can't control. But you can control how you respond to them. And mindfulness, kind of sum it up, the benefit, or one of the big benefits, is that if you think about some external stimulus coming into your awareness, and then at some point you respond to that, the mindfulness creates like an internal mental space, a bigger space of holding that stimulus and considering how you're going to respond to it. So instead of reacting, you respond, if you will. So you can, when you're reacting to things, it's often from like the fight or flight response, right? Fear-based often. And the executive function of your brain just isn't like in gear that much. So you're often making poor decisions. Like, I'm sure everyone can relate to this, particularly in corporate America, which is, have you ever gotten an email that you responded to, and, you probably copied 20 people, and you do it right away, and, it was irritating when you got it, and then you were like, oh my God, why did I send that email, right? And that could either be a little problem or a big problem, depending on
I have about a 30-second pause. I use the Outlook function to delay the send.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's often often 15 or 30 seconds later is all you need, right? So it helps create a bigger space for when those stimuli come in that can be upsetting. You're more calm. Like, it's not even like you have to recover. Like, you're just more calm to begin with. And so you're coming from a wiser and hopefully more compassionate place.
All right, we're going to take our second and final break right now, and we will be back in one more minute.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to yp.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with Timothy Swords of Mindful Leadership Executive Coaching. So you may just have, but I want the audience to be clear. What exactly is mindfulness?
Mindfulness is, you can define it a few different ways. One is like a state of mind, if you will, where you're aware. I mean, it's fundamentally awareness. But most of us are like either thinking about something in the past or planning something in the future, and mostly unconsciously. We're not really truly in the moment, fully aware. It's because we've been conditioned, but through millions of years of evolution, to be like, oh my God, we need to be on alert of a threat.
And also this fallacy of multitasking, even though it seems real.
That's right. Right. Exactly. So mindfulness is, it's an awareness, but I would call it like a lucid awareness, where there's not a lot of judgment going on. You're just seeing things really as they are. So, and there's an agency to it, right? It's not just like passive, I'm just going to accept whatever's coming along. It's really seeing things clearly so we can respond to them wisely and compassionately, right?
More objectively, less emotionally.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So one of the characteristics of what I would call a mindful leader is they're not taking things so personally, right? So they can respond more objectively, as you were saying. That's right.
So it's actually interesting. I didn't make the parallel. I'm just learning, like the audiences are, but we actually, in coaching salespeople, we help them become self-aware. We use assessments like you do, and we measure for the amount of emotional involvement they have, because that impacts negatively their selling often.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or their response, right, to objections, lack of responsiveness, et cetera.
Right.
So interesting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, Kevin. That makes total sense. Yeah.
So there's a science of how the brain is rewired, I read. And that's according to not just you, but Harvard Medical and Mass General and others. So talk about how the brain is actually rewired.
Yeah. So, there's thousands of research projects and articles that have been done now for the last, 40 or 50 years. So, one of the main things is that when we're in this fight or flight mode, our amygdala is so-called hijacked. So, because we're either like ready to fight, or we're frozen, or more modern day, we might be like, fidgeting. But when we're that worked up, literally, as I mentioned a little earlier, the executive function of our brain is not working, or the logical part of our brain is not working. And so literally the practice of mindfulness, where what it is when you're meditating is your thoughts and emotions will keep coming up. Of course, it's not like your mind stops. The idea isn't to stop thinking, but to be aware of those thoughts and emotions. And so you can be aware of upsetting thoughts and emotions or other thoughts and emotions from this mindful place. And you can actually label them like, oh, anger, or anxious, or joy, right? And by engaging sort of both sides of the brain, if you will, you're actually calming the amygdala down. And if you do this enough, you restructure the brain permanently, so it just doesn't get upset as much. So, quick anecdote. I had a personally upsetting career thing happen to me at Fidelity. I had an opportunity to meditate for a month. which I did at a retreat center.
Wow.
And I was pretty upset. So and you're meditating like 10, 12, 14 hours a day. There's a lot of opportunity to label, anger. After those 4 weeks, I was never so upset about anything again in my life. It's not like I can't get upset. I'm still a human being.
Yeah.
But I'm sure my brain structure changed.
So what does a practical daily routine look like? Actually, let me ask that A and B.
Sure.
What does it look like for you, and what would it look like for someone starting out?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So I'd say there's 2 parts of the daily routine for me.
Mm-hmm.
One is the formal meditation practice, which I do first thing in the morning for 40 minutes. And then during the day, there's very practical applications of mindfulness or opportunities to practice, right? So I also walk for a mile before I do any work in the morning. And I try to be more aware of my surroundings than I might otherwise. So like feeling my feet on the ground as I take each step. And that's just like bringing myself back to the present. It's like a little practice. And I'm hearing the birds sing. I'm seeing the beautiful flowers. I'm really enjoying it. It's not like, it's not a chore. I'm having a great time being aware of, the world and the earth and all the beauty. And
you're not on your phone, almost tripping over the sidewalk, and you're not listening to a podcast.
Right. Not usually. I mean, those are all good too, but
yep.
And I mean, it's a funny thing. I was noticing my mind a couple of days ago when I was taking my little morning walk. As I got within maybe 3 minutes from my house, I realized I'd taken the keys out of my pocket. Now I don't need those for another 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But my mind is already in the future, right? And I just laughed at myself. I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
I do that a lot.
Be here in this moment, because, if you're not in this moment for like mundane things, then you're missing like being with your children, right? You're enjoying your wife or your husband, or, I hike a lot. So the beauty of a beautiful view, it's like, so for me, it's not just a way to be more effective, right? It's also a way to be happier.
Let's see some of the areas in which please.
So for people who are starting out,
sorry.
I wanted to mention that you don't need to sit 40 minutes a day to benefit. There's been more recent research, because a lot of the original research were on people who were meditating a lot, right? And, all these great benefits. But more recent research shows that if you do it just like 20 minutes a day, but every day, you can get great benefits, like probably better than 95% of people. And that applies to more than mindfulness. This applies to many things in life.
Do you recommend morning? Doesn't matter?
I mean, in the scheme of things,
yeah.
In theory, it doesn't matter. I'd say for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's hard to just pull out of the activities of the day.
Yeah.
So the mornings, for me, the easiest, because nothing has started yet, so I'm not pulling myself back from it. But also, but as long as, maybe right before dinner could work, or, I wouldn't do it right before you go to sleep, because then you're tired, you probably will go to sleep. Unless you want help going to sleep, then.
I actually have a very short breathing routine I do to help me go to sleep, and it's foolproof. I mean, I'm telling you, it's just that, it's that really quick, some of people know what I mean by 4-7-8, right? It's just, it's quick, it's easy, and I swear by it.
Yeah. Totally.
But some of the problems that you help people overcome could be worry, could be self-doubt, could be burnout.
Yeah.
Certainly anxiety. There's so much anxiety today, right?
Right. Yeah.
What are some of the, go ahead, some of the other challenges or issues?
With people in, in lots of different areas of challenges. So maybe they're, and I'll give you a couple examples too, but maybe they're too emotionally reactive, right? Or maybe they're recently promoted and they just need leadership skills, right? Because, organizations gotten flatter and flatter. So a lot of people getting promoted, they've been individual contributors and their organizations aren't giving them great management training or any. So that's another area. Might be people with imposter syndrome, or like doubt, anxiety, or just there's so much uncertainty right now. So how do you deal with that, right? Mergers, restructuring, tariffs. Right?
Tariffs, yeah.
But a couple of quick case examples. So I was coaching a CFO in a publicly held firm, and he had kind of come up through investment banking and so forth. So he'd kind of been a lone wolf. He didn't really know like the nuances of corporate life, if you will. So he's a brilliant guy. He'd actually grown up very kind of blue collar. His mom wasn't around. She was building a business. She could feed the kids. But he got himself into, an Ivy League school on a scholarship. He's a brilliant guy, but he was kind of the scary guy in the room because he was coming across so intensely. And he wasn't like a mean guy, but he had these blind spots about the impact he was having. So what I call the gap between intention and impact was pretty big for this guy. So we actually did a lot of mindfulness training, which really helped his self-awareness. And so when we got the 360 feedback, and literally people said, "You're scary," he got it. And then he became aware of, oh, what am I doing? And what's behind what I'm doing, which was a lot of anxiety, actually. So he was able to ground himself. Like I talked about my feet on the ground while I was walking. So for him, I recommended try noticing your feet, the feeling, the sensations of your feet on the ground or the floor in a meeting, which he would do at the beginning of a meeting, and that would calm him down. Then he'd be like, oh, I can respond without being so intense, right?
So this is not an easy question. Keep it as easy as you can. I mean, you could spend as much time talking about it as you want, but how do you teach emotional intelligence?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing I do, I do assessments, and I do a variety of assessments. So some are on like all sorts of leadership skills. Some are particularly around emotional intelligence. There's 12 competencies within emotional intelligence or emotional social intelligence, which is it's awareness of yourself, management of yourself. I'll give you the big four.
Okay.
Self-awareness, self-management, which is your emotions, managing your emotions. And then it's social awareness, like being aware of other people.
Others.
And then social management, right? Relationship management, how you manage relationships, right? So how do you teach it? So first, I would do an assessment and say, of these 12 competencies within those 4 big areas, like one might be, so one is positivity, actually. That's one of the competencies. So, if someone's like a CFO, they can easily focus on the downside risk to every decision, right?
Worry.
Right? It's driven by worry, and their training and, risk avoidance, management, all that. But they might get in the way of what's the positive potential return, right, of an opportunity. So, I'm teaching very practical skills, right? I'm not teaching something esoteric.
Right.
So let's say the CFO is Joe. So Joe, okay, I get there's this downside risk, but think about the positive outcomes also. And make sure you're asking people about those and understanding those. And, if you're part of leading the strategy, then talk about those as much as the downside risks, right? Don't just keep talking about the downside risks. And then that applies to how they talk to their investors too, for a publicly held firm. So the way, I sort of work from the inside out a lot, if you will, like what's driving your behaviors. But at the end of the day, it's a behavior that's observable. So we focus on what are those observable behaviors.
This was a really interesting, I think it was your quote, the business world requires, if it wasn't you, you can give credit, but the business world requires a level of toughness to succeed. The reality is that even in the C-suite, we're human beings with thoughts, feelings, and personal lives that can impact how you perform and lead. To me, I'm thinking of, yes, it takes a toughness and, a drive. And I also think of, Jim Collins' level 5 leader, and that's the opposite of drive. It's really not, but so how do you balance that toughness with that? We just talked about, I'll use the word sensitivity, awareness.
No, that's a great question. So you have to make tough decisions in business, right? You have to hopefully optimize the best solution for the shareholders as as well as your other stakeholders, right? Your employees, your customers, right, and so forth. So sometimes those are tough trade-offs. But how you, I mean, even let's take a pretty tough situation where there's a layoff, right? So now you're affecting a lot of people's lives. They lost, big source of income. But how do you deliver that message, right? That makes a big difference, actually, to not only people who are leaving, but the people who are left, right? The people who you've retained. So there's actually a very interesting article just came out this week. I saw it on Bloomberg through KKR, big private equity firm.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very data-driven about their results, if you can imagine. So they actually did a whole big study, along with someone from Stanford University, on the value of empathy on the bottom line. And I actually posted about it on LinkedIn, because there's been articles over the years about how important empathy is. If you go with the Harvard Business Review or other journals like that, this is one of the first I've seen that was so data-driven. So they'll have examples of people coming in and having to lay people off, and how you deliver that message makes all the difference on how motivated the people are who stay, and also how the people feel who are leaving and what they feel about the firm, and what they might say about the firm going to wherever they're going, right? So yeah, I think you need to be tough-minded in terms of at the end of the day, decisions are tough sometimes, but how you approach those and communicate around those will make all the difference in terms of employee engagement, employee retention, and of course, employee engagement, as I'm sure impacts customer satisfaction oftentimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, the biggest layoff that I was adjacent to, it was a client, and they went through a series of reductions in force. And to his credit, this CEO was extremely empathetic, felt really, had to make the decision. He made the tough call, right? There were investors, but by and large, the people that were laid off appreciated him, right? They weren't mad. There might have been one or two, but in general, they were appreciative. They wished him well. They never spoke badly of the company as they were leaving, even those that were out of work for a bit. Most of them that I can see have landed on their feet. This was a couple of years ago, but I credit him for that. I don't know if he's been through this, this understanding, but I do credit him with that degree of compassion. All right, talk about. We just have a couple of minutes. Talk about the offerings. So you work with executives. You work with executive teams. Talk about your various offerings.
Sure. Yeah. So I work with individuals from kind of mid-level to the C-suite on leadership effectiveness. I also, particularly these days, very interested in helping people in career transition. There's a lot of that going on right now. And what I found is a lot of times people going through career transitions are also dealing with difficult things in their home life. So they really can really benefit from the support of a coach who's kind of, particularly someone like myself, and not saying I'm the only person who does this, but kind of works from the inside out, right? As well. And then I also work with leadership teams. I've done a fair amount of leadership team development. And then underlying all those things are assessments. So I can also do standalone assessments for people interested in just knowing where they are, and where their strengths and what are their challenges that they
at the individual level as well as the team level, I imagine.
That's right. I actually do assessments at both levels, and then I also teach mindfulness, and I also speak. So I'm actually giving some webinars on how to be calm in turbulent times.
Last question. I'll point out for the audience, Timothy's information is in the crawl. It will be in a moment. Who should reach out to you from these audiences, the listening and viewing audiences, and why?
So, I'm often contacted by either board members who want help for their CEO or the other members of the C-suite that certainly the C-suite, either for themselves or their teams, or heads of HR, of course. And anyone, seeking to improve their leadership capabilities.
Excellent. Listen, Timothy, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I know you're busy, and I value your time, and I'm sure the audience got some good value out of this as well.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your great questions, Kevin.
No problem. I'll see you soon. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. As always, this is a show about business and business challenges often. If you've got concerns about the sales effectiveness of your company, whether your sales team is you or very small or it's very large or anywhere in between, feel free to reach out to me. And that's on LinkedIn or Facebook at Winning Business Radio. You can drop me a note. One of my many email addresses is kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Incorporated. We're part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. Listen, we're not right for everybody, but hey, maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you, as always, to producer and engineer Juan for another job well done. Thank you, Juan. Be sure to join us next Monday, May 5th, when my guest will be entrepreneur Greg Vetter, author of Undressed, the unfiltered story of my failed American dream and how it led to success. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.